Hi, everybody. It's meteorologist Joe Cioffi on this Saturday afternoon as we have to deal with this major storm that's going to be developing in the eastern part of the United States. We also now have Tropical Depression 18, which became a depression from the potential tropical cyclone that the Hurricane Center had since late yesterday. So now we have a depression, may become a tropical storm later today or tonight. Tropical storm watches are up for southeastern Florida now in the upper Keys, in addition to the warnings that are up for western Cuba and for the Bahamas. We're going to see this storm take shape in the eastern part of the United States, and models are kind of having still a bit of a difficult time trying to zero in on the exact track. But I think if we pay attention to where the track is, ultimately going to wind up. If you wind up being near, or if you're east of the track, wind is going to be a bit of a bigger issue for you on the first pass. If you're west of the storm track, not so much. But rain might be a bigger issue west of the storm track as opposed to the east. Although I think everybody's going to wind up with a decent amount of rain. And there could be some strong winds along the coastline of southern New England, Long Island's South Shore and East End, particularly the East End. I think there certainly could be some gusts off just offshore on the order of 50 or 60 knots or even higher. Now, whether those strong winds make it onto the immediate coastline remains to be seen. Jersey Shore is a bit trickier because if the low center is offshore, you might not have too big of a problem with respect to the wind until afterward. I think everybody's going to have real strong winds later Sunday night into Monday morning when the storm goes into upstate New York and it's blowing from the northwest at 20 to 30 knots with gusts at 40 knots or higher. That's going to happen in most places. Some places are going to see the wind stronger back actually on the backside than on the front side. This is going to be fast. It's a fast-moving system. You've got the tropical system that's somehow getting involved in all this. So you know what? Let's start the video portion. If those of you who are joining from Europe and the UK, I do touch on some of your weather toward the end of this, and then we'll come back and we'll talk some more. So just stand by, folks. We're going to start off with the major storm that is taking shape in the eastern part of the United States, and also in tandem with that, we're going to be talking about the tropical depression that may become Tropical Storm Philippe later today or this evening. That's coming out of the northwestern Caribbean, and we've got tropical storm watches up for southeastern Florida now in the upper Keys because of the proximity of the system and the fact that it's probably going to become a tropical storm, but I don't expect it to strengthen that much. It'll strengthen some, but not that much. Now, I was going to start off here with the issue of winds. This is a very tough part of the forecast because you've got the models focusing on multiple low centers. So where those low centers are positioned is really going to determine who gets into the tight gradient and who doesn't. Now, this is for this afternoon. This is for early Sunday morning, 2 a.m., where we've got the GFS actually having a fairly wrapped up low, which represents the depression up in the northwestern Bahamas. And now you start to see, in response to the deep trough in the east on Sunday morning, you'll notice, these isobars they're all stretched out, and there's lower pressures. Pressure's probably going to be falling rapidly across the Carolinas. And there you have another surface low center sitting just to the east of Hatteras. By tomorrow afternoon, the wind field begins to expand out over the coastal waters. Tomorrow evening, we have a wrapped up, actually fairly deep surface low. Looks like that, even though it doesn't print an L, I'm just counting off the isobars. That's probably on the order of a 976 millibar load southeast of Atlantic City. And notice the wind field at that point. The strongest winds are really east and north of the center. There isn't a lot of wind going on west and south. Now, whichever model gets it right with regards to where the actual low center is going to determine where this wind field sets up. So if by chance the European is more correct with that low center west of the GFS position, that would bring those strong winds onshore to the New Jersey coast. Based on this model, I would certainly have to forecast that for the New Jersey coast, certainly for central and northern New Jersey, and for sure for Long Island and for southern and southeastern New England, you'll be getting into some of the strong gales. The red areas are 40 knots or higher. The purples are 50 knots or higher. I think these are sustained winds, so I think there could be, gusts certainly at well in excess of 50 knots out of this in some places, where again, north and east of the actual track of the low. If you are west and north of the low track, rain is going to be your bigger issue rather than the wind. Now, here we are at 1 a.m. and you can see that the low center is well up now into upstate New York, just not too far west of Albany, moving northwestward. This low that is southeast of Long Island and Nantucket, that is the representation of what the model sees as the tropical depression / tropical storm Philippe, assuming that it becomes one. I tend to think at this point that rather than be a separate entity, it'll probably already be absorbed. And that might also impact how this all plays out. It's very interesting and very unusual to see, a setup like this. We've got this deep non-tropical storm, which would have developed anyway. And now you've got this tropical element that's into the part of the equation. Whether it changes anything or not remains to be seen. Again, if it winds up getting absorbed faster, it'll probably juice this thing up a bit more, especially from the standpoint of some rain. And then by Monday morning, the low center is up into upstate New York. This is where late Sunday, early Monday morning till about midday, this is where everybody gets into the strong winds. There will be strong winds from the northwest and west at about 20 to 30 knots with gusts up to 40 knots or higher over a large portion of the northeast, probably from, say, from Maryland and the Delmarva Peninsula, north and east of there. We'll probably see some strong gusty winds into Monday afternoon, and then it pulls out. Now, from the standpoint of rain, let's take a look at what the models do with rainfall. And they're fairly generous. I could use the total rainfall rather than the 24 hours. This is the only event that we have, so we can get a fair picture of this. But notice big rains for parts of northeastern Pennsylvania, most of New Jersey, certainly the northern half, down along the coast over Long Island, New York City, into the Hudson Valley and western Connecticut. The white areas are all 2 inches or more. You can see the scale here on the side. You get into the darker purples and you're talking 4 to 5 inches. It's quite possible that this could be underdone. In instances like this, you oftentimes have models having a difficult time picking out the exact upside. I just want to be careful because of the fact that it's been tough here to get widespread rainfalls of size in the last, not only just the last number of weeks, it's been non-existent the last number of weeks, but really in this whole dry pattern that we've had for the last year or so, it's been very difficult to do better in terms of rainfall than what the models are showing. So I think it's probably safe to say that, it's going to be every bit of a couple of inches of rain for most places. West and north of the low track, I would go to the upside of that. If I'm east of the low track, I might want to go a little bit lower. But it's a pretty substantial area of rain that's being indicated by the GFS. And I'll put the NAM model up also because the NAM was rather aggressive, has a bit more of an extensive area of 2-inch plus rains. You see these pockets where some places get a little bit less. I'm not sure if that's because of the geography in these areas, if the model is picking up on some mountains or something. I don't know. But notice that throughout much of central PA, on up into much of north central New York State, we've got some 2, 3, 4-inch amounts or more. Long Island does well, a little bit less in New Jersey, but it would be fair to say that everybody gets at least 2 inches out of this. This is the other thing with the NAM, by the way. When we look at the wind on the NAM at the peak, the NAM, for some reason, I think it's incorrect about this. It's about 3 to 6 hours slower than the other models, but the NAM does bring that 40 to 50 knot sustained winds to eastern Long Island, southeastern Connecticut, Rhode Island, and much of southeastern Massachusetts. Notice again the winds not that much on as the storm move by on its first pass. The winds not that strong until the low gets up into upstate New York, and then as we get into Monday morning, you start to see very strong gusty winds across most of the areas inland of the coastline. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's going to be every bit of 20 to 35 with some gusts into the 40s, maybe even up to 50 miles an hour during Monday morning on the backside of this strong storm. And then it pulls away to the northeast. Now, let me jump to the satellite view. We're going to first look at the tropical depression here as it is moving northeastward at 22 miles an hour. So it's already beginning to accelerate into the deep trough into the eastern part of the United States. There's a well-defined core that's of convection that has developed this morning. So that's why they were able to designate this as a tropical depression and not that potential tropical cyclones indicator. And while wind shear is low for the next 24 hours or so, relatively low, it's got that opportunity to strengthen into a tropical storm. And also, I think it's going to get some juice from this deep upper trough. Now, look at how deep and how much mileage this trough covers. I mean, it goes all the way from James Bay down into the central Gulf of Mexico. And, it's setting up like this. And the southern part of this trough is the part that's getting strong. This arm is going to be lifting up and around. So this is why the tropical system is now moving north and northeast and accelerating because that jet stream aloft that's going to be carrying this along is strengthening and beginning in the process of lifting up and around. So it's just kind of like a giant arm that just picks it up and then brings it up the East Coast. You would, again, regardless of whether there's a tropical system there or not, if this were not here, you still would have low pressure developing off the southeast coast of the United States and intensifying as it moves northward or even northwestward up the coast. That was going to happen regardless of whether there was tropical involvement in here or not. But interesting to see all these players going on with the deep trough, the new surface storm that's going to develop with that, and the tropical system. In the meantime, at least for the rest of today, the weather doesn't look too bad. We're getting some low clouds coming in, some low-level moisture with the wind off the water starting to bring in some cloud cover here that the satellite, you don't really see it too well, but it's there because I can see it out my window. And the front to the west, producing showers and thunderstorms down to western Pennsylvania, western New York, down into West Virginia and eastern Kentucky. That's pushing to the east. The snow that was going on in the upper peninsula of Michigan, that is beginning to wind down, and that will end in short order. And then, of course, the focus of our attention is going to shift to the East Coast. Why don't we take a look at the GFS with regards to the weather around the country? You folks in the West are pretty quiet, but that's actually going to change because after this is done, we are going to see a bit of a pattern change going forward. The weather in the East relaxes, but you'll notice out in the West, it starts to pick up some steam. We have a trough that's going to be coming into the West Coast with a storm system late next week coming into the Pacific Northwest with rains and some snows, and even some heavy rain gets into parts of northern and central California, by the way, out of this. In the east, we have a warm front, cold front to deal with at some point, but overall, the pattern in the east is going to go back to a ridge in the east and the trough in the west, although it's not going to be like it was for the last 6 or 7 weeks or so, where the ridge in the east was, at times very strong. I think this is going to be, it's going to be flatter, but there's going to be a general ridge in the eastern part of the United States. Looks like some snow's coming into parts of these go near the Canadian border. There'll be some opportunities for snow there, and more action coming in to the western part of the United States as we look into the longer term. I want to show you, by the way, will you look at the 10-day? I'm going to try to make a mental note of showing you the 10-day snowfall map every day so you can get a picture of what is supposed to happen. So we'll start with Monday and Tuesday, and you can see a lot of snow near and north of the Canadian border. That seems to be where the action is going to be across the country. Not too much happening, of course, in the latitudes further south. Uh, Again, with the way the upper air pattern is setting up, that's not a big surprise. I'll show you that really fast. And you'll notice that, well, let me go back. We'll go back to where the trough is. So here it is, very deep, cuts off, lifts up, out, and then the whole trough kind of starts to pull out. And you can see how the jet sort of backs westward as we go through the rest of this week. And then you start to get troughing in the western part of the United States and ridging in the eastern part of the United States as we go into the second week of November. And that ridge is still there, by the way, going into the middle part of the month, if you want to believe it. Models on this on the long range have been occasionally flipping back and forth with regards to this. I want to take a look at the weather across the pond, so to speak, because I know there are those of you that are watching from the UK. Ever since Ophelia, I seem to have developed an audience. So I've always thought, by the way, that I was British in a previous life for some reason. I don't know why. It just seems like everything that the Brits do culturally, I just kind of I get it. I don't know, the literature, the comedy, everything. I understand it. So you guys are actually not too bad. You got a nice high that's going to be sitting overhead early for the early part of next week. And looks like some storminess out back, way out through Siberia. Some rain coming into parts of Poland and the Ukraine. Turns to snow where it's colder up in Russia. Low pressure going into Spain. By the time we get to next weekend, looks like some rain coming into the British Isles. I don't see any big storms. There's a stronger front along about day 9, which is now around November 7th and 8th. But as we know, that's all going to change over time. But I figured I wanted to give you at least a look and maybe give you a snowfall map to boot. And much of the snow is still going on well to the east of certainly the coastal, the western part of Europe. Although it looks like some snow shows up in, I guess that's the higher elevations up Scotland, up in Norway and Sweden, and then you go eastward from there, also down in the Alps. I guess in places where you normally see the snow this time of year, you're going to see it. This is the GFS 10-day snow forecast, and it is subject to huge changes, especially after you get past the 4th or 5th day on this. All right, stand by, folks. So we'll take some questions and join the conversation in the chat board. Just give me 1 second to make the switch. Here we go. Philip Hood asking about winds of southwestern Connecticut or western Long Island Sound tomorrow. That's kind of a tough call. Honestly, I think the winds, at least in that part, might wind up being stronger Sunday night into Monday morning than they will later Sunday into Sunday evening. But you won't have to go very far to find some of the stronger winds if you go into central or eastern Long Island. Certainly, I think you're going to see the stronger winds there, and also for the Connecticut coast, say from New Haven eastward. All right, probably the better bet based on what I'm looking at. But you know what? If this low tracks a little further to the west, that could drag those stronger winds further to the west. So it's kind of a tough call. And certainly it'll probably be a bit better in the morning than in the afternoon. But even tomorrow morning, the south wind is going to be picking up to 20 to 30 miles an hour ahead of all of this. Let's see. Billy Johnson, parents flying out of Islip Monday afternoon. The winds will be a problem. Well, it's going to be windy into the afternoon. It'll probably still be breezy for a good part of the afternoon, Billy. So it may cause some issues. Andrew McCormick, my pleasure to do the UK overview. I'm going to try and do that at least to spend a minute or so on it every day and more if things are relevant. By the way, I don't know if you can see this. Let me see if you can see this. I just want to show you what kind of demand I have. But if you look over my shoulder, okay, that is my cat. and he is fixated on. I have vitamins in there and things, and in fact, usually he gets the fish oil. We got something. Yep. Unbelievable. Oh. It's ridiculous. This has got to be the funniest thing ever since he was a kitten. And we've got that cabinet. We've got all kinds of big bands to hold it. He still manages to get through. He likes these fish oil tablets. And he gets in there and takes them. This is the nut house I live in, okay? It's just ridiculous. Sorry. And by the way, this is the third time I've tried to live stream today, but because of the audience I have behind me. Anyhow, you'll notice, by the way, I want to address this, very important. With respect to tides for tomorrow, this is not going to be a big tide problem for two reasons. One is we have the storm just moving up too fast. And then we also have the fact that we're in the last quarter, which is we're in the low part of the high tide cycle. This is not going to be a big coastal flooding issue. If we were dealing with multiple tide cycles in a new moon or a full moon, then we might have a problem. But I'm thinking for coastal flooding, it's not going to be a huge deal at this point from what I'm seeing. And yes, you're right, Joyce Mack. I should get him his own fish oil pill bottle. This way it'll save my time and energy. Just amazing. But he loves just going into that cabinet. And he is, Joyce Mack, my comic relief. Absolutely. Taco Bell, Anthony Orr, is he late today? I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. Maybe he's working, he'll pop in later on at some point. Will the Jersey Shore get high wind, Earl Warren? I tend to think the shore may wind up getting stronger winds after the low goes by than before. But again, if that low winds up tracking, say, near Cape May or west of Cape May, you might get some pretty decent wind late tomorrow into tomorrow night. I hate to kind of answer the question by not answering it, but because of the low track being where it is, and the fact that you've got multiple low centers and you've got this tropical system in there in the mix, it makes the wind profile for the approach tomorrow a little bit more difficult to forecast than it otherwise would be, because just east and north and east of that low center, there's going to be a band of 50 to 60 knot winds. Probably just offshore. But again, that would be just east and north of that low center, and where that low center is going to make a difference. Joyce Mack, are we going to have a high number of nor'easters this season since they had so many hurricanes this year? Joyce, I don't know that one necessarily has to do is connected to the other. I will, however, say that over the last few years we haven't seen a lot of nor'easters. There have been a few, but not very many. I would probably bet that if you were to plot the frequency of them over time, we're probably in some kind of a low cycle right now. But the appearance of this one and how it's appearing with that deep trough in the east might be a signal. That could be a signal of more to come. Usually these things, when they're like this and this dynamic, they're not one and done deals. It may show up again. So, this is usually also the time of year where I start to pay attention to how the pattern evolves, because oftentimes that's a signature of where we're going in the wintertime. So we're going to just kind of make a mental note of this nor'easter and then see where it goes from here. Awesome Gamer. The Atlantic doesn't seem to want to quit. It has slowed down some. We're not throwing out hurricanes every other day, but still time that we could see, one more, particularly with the, ridge in the eastern part of the United States, at least coming back to the eastern part of the United States later next week and into the long range for a little while. I tend to think we're probably going to see the pattern be a bit volatile here, going back and forth, doing different things. I don't think we're going to stay in this ridge in the, like this trough in the east thing pattern seems to only be lasting about 10 days from beginning to end. So maybe that when we go back to the ridge in the east, that may only last a week to 10 days and then change to something else. And by the way, it doesn't mean we can't have ridges on both coasts and a trough in the middle, or weak troughing in the east, weak ridging in the west, or weak ridging in the west, weak ridging in the east, weak troughing in the west. There's all sorts of different combinations that we could evolve into. I just don't know which one it is. And then, of course, if you put the block into the block or lack thereof into the equation, then we could have something else entirely. Next live stream, Delvin, I'll probably live stream. I'm going to shoot for 9 o'clock Eastern time. I think that may work, depending on what my schedule is for the rest of the afternoon. Tony M, glad you caught this live stream from Tony Mondero of Harrison, New Jersey. Good to see you here, buddy. Thanks for being here. Yeah. The weekends, the live streams. I've been trying to do the weekday live streams starting them between 6 and 6:15 p.m. Eastern time, and on the weekends, I have much more flexibility. Although tomorrow I will be working, so I'll probably do a live stream around noontime, and then maybe another one tomorrow evening. But I'll be at the workplace tomorrow, so we'll be doing it from there tomorrow evening. All right, folks, so we got you all updated on everything that's going on. Hurricane season ends in the Pacific on December 1st. Awesome. It starts 15 days earlier than the Atlantic, but it ends at the same time. All right, you're getting thoughts of 70 mile per hour on the barriers of the Jersey Shore and Seaside. Tony, I've been saying, if the low is west of Cape May, then there might be some fairly strong winds along the New Jersey Shore. But if it, the other thing is, you could also have the low west of Cape May, but because of the fact that you've got a couple of centers here, multiple low centers, you may wind up with not that much wind on the shore, and most of the wind will be over Long Island and out in the coastal waters. So I think I'm not going to, probably not going to know that answer until it happens, unfortunately. I hate to kind of punt, but sometimes you have to punt in the weather world. I think this may be one of those instances. All right. Howard, Fios tomorrow, not picks. All right, so let's we'll call this one an end to this one. Live stream tonight. We'll do it again at 9 o'clock Eastern time. So enjoy the rest of your afternoon while the weather is good. Get some stuff done around the house, cleanups, fall cleanups, or just maybe head out and do a little pumpkin picking or whatever is left to do as we near Halloween next week. Can't wait for next Sunday when we go to standard time, because then all the models come out an hour earlier, and that's a lot better because then I can actually occasionally wait up for the European when it's relevant. All right, have a great day. See you later.